The Allen Lund Company continues to support the owner-operators of OOIDA. Thank you for what you do, and stay safe.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Scott Thompson.
Thanks for joining us. Scott here, filling in for host Mark Reddick today, although we will be hearing from him a bit later on. We'll lead off here in just a moment with an executive order from the Trump administration regarding English proficiency in the trucking industry. Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine joins us to clear up a bit of confusion about the current landscape and to tell us what comes next. Then Mark calls up David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal to talk about which violations come with a bit more of a sting for truck drivers, along with some scary letters you might someday get in the mail and how to handle them. And then we'll close things out by looking at the ongoing search for long-term solutions to the Highway Trust Fund. Bryce Mungin of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office lays out some basic principles OOIDA would like to see followed along the way. So lots to get to on today's show. But first, that English proficiency news. So let's get right to it here. President Trump on Monday releasing a series of executive orders, one of which is dedicated to truck drivers and the issue of English proficiency. Joined here by Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine to detail what happened here. Tyson, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
To say this has been a hot topic of late, Tyson, would be an understatement. And in short, we're going to get into the details of this executive order here in just a minute. But I think it's important to get into the background of how we got here first. Walk us through it.
Absolutely. So the requirement for truck drivers to speak English has been around for almost a century. It's a long-standing rule here. But let's kind of fast forward to present day and where the issue is. So in 2005, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, CVSA, they decided that a non-compliance of the English proficiency regulation would be an out-of-service violation. So it's no longer a slap on the wrist. You violate this, you're out of service. And so that was the way it was for 10 years. Fast forward to 2015, and then CVSA decided to kind of do an about-face on that guidance. And so therefore, non-compliance of the English proficiency requirement would no longer be an out-of-service violation, which is the way it has been since. So for the past 10 years, because of CVSA's guidance on out-of-service violations, that is not the case with English proficiency. That's worth noting because FMCSA, or the federal government at all, does not decide what is and is not considered an out-of-service violation.
Right.
They transferred or delegated that power over to CVSA. So CVSA has the power to decide who is and is not to be placed out of service. So that's kind of worth noting. So then, that will then bring us to the present day.
The executive order.
Yeah.
Right, which was the talk of the day on Monday. It does a few things, but it really leans into the enforcement of this English proficiency requirement. Walk us through, I guess.
Sure.
Talk about what this executive order does.
So I mentioned that in 2015, CVSA did their an about face on the out of service violation. A year later, in 2016, FMCSA issued kind of like a similar policy guidance. What this executive order does is that within 60 days, the DOT and FMCSA will rescind that 2016 policy guidance similar to CVSA. But what the executive order explicitly says is that it'll make the DOT, FMCSA shall take all necessary and appropriate actions to ensure that the out-of-service criteria are revised so that if you violate the English proficiency regulation, you're placed out of service. But this is doing a lot of heavy lifting, this next line,
Yep.
Including by working with the relevant entities responsible for establishing the out-of-service criteria.
CVSA.
Which is essentially, yes, a nod to CVSA. You need to do this also. But that's again, so the 60-day, the orders for FMCSA to rescind their policy, but also to encourage CVSA to pretty much follow suit.
Yeah, and I think what you're explaining here, I think, has been maybe misunderstood by some people out there because the finger keeps getting pointed at FMCSA, and let's not make any mistake about it. FMCSA, obviously, as the safety agency here, does have some pull and some muscle behind it, but it really is CVSA who is going to be the one that has to make a decision on this. And to that point, their driver committee is meeting this week and taking up this very issue. And it would seem that they've got momentum behind this issue to do something about it and maybe reverse course. We're keeping an eye on this, obviously, but this could and may actually happen very quickly here.
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, just earlier this month, well before this executive order, OOIDA petitioned to CVSA to do exactly this.
Yep.
So OOIDA was well ahead of this. So yeah, they petitioned to the CVSA to change their policy to make non-compliance of English proficiency to be an out-of-service violation. Yes, so they are reviewing that petition. That's what's going to be happening earlier this week. So from what I understand, by the end of the week, CVSA will decide whether or not to, pretty much follow through with that petition and then reinstate the out-of-service violation requirement for non-compliance of the English proficiency regulation. I would imagine that they would do so.
Yeah.
I don't think they've ever been more pressured before, because you have a literal presidential executive order essentially directing them or advising them to do that. So, I would put good money that they would, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah, and assuming the driver committee approves this, it will then go to the executive committee, which I believe meets on Thursday, and they will discuss this, and if they pass it, essentially, it would move on, and it would be the new criteria, or I guess the old criteria, going back to it, however you want to look at it.
Right.
One more issue, too. We don't have a whole lot of time, but non-domiciled CDLs, when I was at Matt's last month, that was something that everybody was talking about. That is also mentioned in this executive order. Again, we're kind of looking at blurred lines here between English proficiency and non-domiciled CDLs, but it's something the Trump administration apparently is looking at as well, right?
Yeah, specifically, they're going to identify any unusual patterns or numbers or other irregularities when it comes to the issuances of this non-domiciled CDL. So there's a lot of, you're basically going to look into, some of the things that the industry has been complaining about for years, that there are loopholes or, bad actors out there who are taking advantage of either non-enforcement or, again, just finding some workarounds when it comes to, non-domiciled CDLs. Essentially, without getting too much in details, the federal government is going to actively look into that, see what they can find. Another thing they're going to do is evaluate and improve to verify authenticity and validity of domestic and international CDLs, kind of similar to the Arkansas law, which has to deal with, false documents. They're going to look into stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, this is an issue that's really moved quickly here in the past couple months, and I suppose it does kind of speak to the force and the power of speaking out and letting your concerns be known, and we'll see how this kind of plays out here, but it clearly is something that people are worried about, and as OOIDA has said time and time again, this is a safety issue, whether it's English proficiency, whether it's non-domiciled CDLs. It's all about safety and knowing who's on the road and making sure that they can comply with all the rules and regulations that are out there. So, again, we'll have updates on this later in the week, obviously, as CVSA meets and discusses this topic. Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine, we always appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Updates to this story and more trucking news 24/7 over on our website, landline.media. And that's Landline Now News for today. Coming up next, nobody likes getting a ticket or citation, that's for sure, but for truckers, it's even worse than it is for other people because some tickets can cause problems later on or even take you off the road altogether. So what are those violations? Mark Reddick discusses that as well as some scary letters you might get in the mail and how to handle them with David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal. And then after that, we'll discuss what truckers need when it comes to fixing the Federal Highway Trust Fund. Bryce Mungin of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office joins us for that talk. So lots more show coming your way right here on Landline Now, so please do stick around.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget misaccuracy when your truck on a CAT scale.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
With rising costs affecting everyone, switching to a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper can help you avoid expensive repairs and downtime. Save money and keep your truck running smooth with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Landline Now, welcome back. Nobody likes getting a ticket or a citation or anything else related to that. But for truckers, it's even worse than it is for anyone else. That's because some tickets can show up later and bite you or even take you off the road. So what are those tickets or violations, and how is it that they can create additional problems beyond just a fine? I spoke about it recently with David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal.
What I really wanted to explore with this topic is the kind of second layer of penalties that states can apply to driver's licenses, specifically CDLs. So we all are familiar with the idea of ticket points. This is 3 points. This is 5 points. This might put points on my license. This is a no point violation. Everyone's really talking in those terms. And that can affect a driver who has a CDL. However, there's a second layer of that, which is the penalties that are specifically for a driver with a CDL, and that usually have to do with a driver getting his CDL revoked, so his Class A license. So he'll still have a normal license, but that extra certification, a state can take that away, usually because of specific violations.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get into some examples of those violations. And what are the ones that are particularly harmful in that sense?
So there's usually a shorter list than you would find of tickets that just give points. And usually they are either things that are very specific to trucking or things that are really bad, like bad violations. Things that are speeding 15 over or more would be an example of a really bad violation. Fleeing the scene of an accident. Things like holding a cell phone while you're driving a CMV would be something that's specific for truckers. Or possession of drug or alcohol in the truck would be, you can drive with a case of beer in your pickup truck. It's not that big of a deal. But if you're in your CMV, that's a no-no. You can't have that. So, and obviously certain states, will have legal rules for marijuana. But by and large, the federal government says, no, CMV drivers, you got to get that out of your vehicle. So it's those sort of violations. Something that's really important is that every state, just like with all, these little rules, every state has a different short list of these violations that can really harm you. So it would be exhaustive to go through it here. But what you should really do is do some research online, find out for the state that you're licensed in, okay, what is this list? And what are the time periods for the penalty? Because they'll sneak up on you really fast. Usually it's 2 violations within 3 years. That's really easy to get. And so, I got caught speeding, 70 and a 55 is what the officer wrote down. And 3 years later, I get another one. Not that big of a deal. Maybe I'm in California and that 55 mile an hour on all highways for trucks thing is in effect. And oops, I just got caught, but it's not that big of a deal. Well, it is a big deal. If you're licensed anywhere, not just California, it translates back over to Virginia, and all of a sudden, 15 plus speedings in 3 years, and your license is suspended for 60 days. Sorry.
Now, one of the things that we kind of started with is when you sent me an email about this topic, you said these are things that can secretly affect you. But for example, if you received a ticket, you got a ticket and that it's not a great thing one way or the other. How are people not getting that this is something that's going to hurt them in this manner?
Well, this kind of secondary short list that usually directs towards the disqualification of a Class A license, it's not something that people really talk about very much. It's not something that officers talk about, that attorneys talk about, if an attorney is fighting for you in court. And so I just wanted to draw attention to it because it is something that like I said, sometimes you won't think about it, because it's been 3 years since you got a ticket. And maybe those are the only 2 tickets on your record. One of them could be something like a cell phone. One of them could be something like a super speeder. And so they may not seem like they relate to one another or would affect one another at all. Most of the time, in regular violation points on your driver's license record, those can only affect you for 2 or maybe 3 years, and they all have to stack up together. Usually 3, 4 violations would have to stack up together for anything to happen. So these can really sneak up on you.
Okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how you handle this situation, and I would assume the best way would be to act proactively. To try and deal with them as they come up. I mean, is this something where when you get one of these, you just need to challenge it in court? Is that something that even works the way the laws are structured now? And if not that, what is your best course?
Yeah, it's always worthwhile to check and see if you can fight it in court. Sometimes you can't, and there is a unfortunate growing trend against due process for CDL drivers in the U.S. There's little pockets of it, little hot spots, but it is a growing trend. But yes, always see if you can get help to fight the ticket. If not, there are some other ways that you can try to clean up your record and prevent this trap from triggering on you. They're much harder to do, and it's things like expungements, which is very rarely available for traffic tickets, traffic violations, and is always expensive. And usually it takes a long time. So it's definitely not the best option. The best thing you can do is try to fight it on the front end as much as possible to prevent it from getting on your license in the first place.
Well, let's turn to those that don't really hurt you. And I think in a lot of these cases, these are things people might think will hurt them. What are some examples of those violations?
So there's a lot of violations that seem very serious because they might have fines that are in the hundreds of dollars. I'm thinking about not having a permit, or going off of a truck route, or maybe crossing a bridge that's not rated for trucks. Then you get slapped with $1,000 fine. So they can seem really serious and scary because you've got an officer yelling at you for, why didn't you do this? Or you get put out of service possibly until you can get that permit. But a lot of these violations actually don't affect your record at all. Oftentimes there's a big fine to pay, and the court that the case goes to, they want to collect that fine. That's really what they're here for, is to get that money from you. Oftentimes the judge will not reduce the fine, and so you'll end up spending a lot of extra time and money trying to get that done, and then you just have to pay it out anyway. That's not always the case, but my advice is the same as with the other violations, is double check and see what you can fight and what you can't, and what might affect you. The types of tickets that I'm specifically thinking of that seem like a really big deal are for local ordinances, usually a truck route, or too heavy for a bridge, don't go down this road. And that can seem like, oh shoot, this is really going to affect my license. But more often than not, because you're breaking rules that are just for that city or just for that county, they actually don't really translate very well up to like a state violation code, and especially over to another state where you might be licensed. So if you drive through the middle of a little dirt town in Texas and you're licensed in Minnesota, you might want to check and see, did that ticket they gave you actually report to Texas, or should I say, will it report to the state of Texas, and will the state of Texas report it to your home state and your driver's license record? Oftentimes not. And so you could just pay those instead of going through all of the process of getting an attorney and trying to fight it, and usually ending up with the same result anyway, having to pay the fine.
I do remember a case just like what you're talking about, and it was a trucker who was crossing from Memphis, Tennessee, just over the border into Mississippi, and he went some distance into that town south of Memphis, and all of a sudden he got to a four-way stop, and there were signs on each direction, including the one he had just come from, that said, no trucks.
Oh, no.
So by the time he gets there, and there were no signs up until that point. Mm-hmm. And so he tried to turn around and go back, but of course they got him. And it was, in fact, $1,000 fine. So very real. And this is a guy who was using a trucker GPS that should have had truck routes. But I think some of these towns are doing this and maybe not informing the people that make the GPS units.
I would think so. It's hard to prove that anything is intentional, but the trends and the specific stories really point in that direction, that it is in their best interests to not be very informative and collect a fine rather than be informative and slightly more safe for these truckers and for their own citizens in their towns. I have a story similar that the attorney that we asked to help us with this actually admitted that there's a little town, I think it was in Illinois, who wanted to buy a new bridge. And so every time a truck went over their old bridge, which was no longer weight rated, safety rated for those trucks, they would slap them with, I think it was a $12,000 fine. And they were just buying their bridge one ticket at a time. They would send the fine to the company, and oftentimes the carrier would be like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? I guess we just have to pay it. And I don't know if they ever got their new bridge, but we fought that ticket. We got the fine reduced.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's go ahead and go on to our second topic here. And this is, Alex, something that you kind of specialize in, which is these scary letters you can get. And one of the things I wanted to hit on first is we've seen a lot of cases where the scary letter, which says, do this now or face a penalty, is actually a scam. And if you have something that looks like it might be a scam, but you're not sure, what is your best course of action in that case? And a good example is a letter that looks like it's from the DOT that says you must update your BOC3 right now or face a penalty. But of course, that may not be something you need to do right then, and they're going to charge you a big fee for doing it for you. So what is your best course of action if you get a letter like that?
Well, on something like that, you've got to get somebody who can investigate. I mean, it's whether it's an attorney, whether it's, I don't know, somebody in your carrier who has information, call and see if they pick up the phone. But when you started this, I was thinking of, I can't remember honestly what state it was, but we have a state where in the small town, there's a gas station on the edge of town, and it says you can't turn around in this gas station. On their underneath the sign where they give you the gas prices. It's not an official sign. It's not the police. It's not a police sign, and then they'll send you like a $500 fine you must pay now. And then they'll send you a second letter. Now it's $750, and they just, but it has nothing to do. It's not related to the police. I just can't even imagine a court saying, "Oh, you put up a sign, just a homemade sign, and said they can't turn around or there'll be a penalty."
I've been talking with David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal. We'll have the rest of that conversation after a short commercial break. But in the meanwhile, you can learn more about some of the legal issues that you can encounter in trucking by calling CDL Legal at 913-738-4836 or by going to their website, cdllegal.com. Again, that's 913-738-4836 or at cdllegal.com. We'll be back in just a moment with more. Please stay with us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
At Truck Stop, we've built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Firestone's FD694 drive tire for long haul and regional applications now delivers 126,000 more removal miles than the Yokohama TY517 MC2. Contact your Firestone commercial dealer to learn more.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Before the break, I was talking with David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal, and our topics included various tickets and violations that can come back and create more problems for you later on, as well as scary letters that arrive in the mail and what to do about them. We had just covered the problems when those scary letters are a scam. We now continue that conversation in progress with more types of scary letters that you might get in the mail. Well, let's talk about some of the examples of scary letters that you mentioned when you emailed me about the topic earlier. And one of them that I think is not specific to trucking, but a lot of truckers probably deal with, is collection agencies. And these folks can be incredibly aggressive and very threatening. And again, what is your first step? And especially, let's just assume in this case, you do owe someone money and it might be a legitimate collection attempt. What's your first step?
My first step is always to ask for the original bill that you have. Now, if it's a court case, that which is a little different, and it's an overdue fine, you just got to pay it. I mean, because if it's an overdue fine that they're trying to collect on, it can affect your disposition. You might have gotten it dismissed, but you went over the time, and they at some point will renege on that disposition. That happens a lot, and so if and part of the deal is, and I think this is, I mean, they're trying to help the drivers, but they'll give you 1 to 3, sometimes 6 months or more to pay the fine, and then the driver just forgets. I just say, pay that fine and get it done with, especially if you got a great result in court. But again, like on the collections, they should have an original bill from whoever they're collecting for you. And if they don't, then you just continue to press the issue and ask them for the bill. But it's different when it's a court.
Well, let's talk about the court case, especially an overdue fine, which you just mentioned. Let's just take the scenario where you are that trucker who forgot because they gave you a lot of time and you put it in a pile where you were sure to find it later. And I think we've all done that. Right. But if you don't get that deadline, what sort of consequences could you be facing there?
Well, again, like the court case is predicated on if there's a fine, it's not over until the fine has been paid. And so if you run into that, or you get a notice from the court, I mean, you just have to drop everything and pay it. And hopefully they haven't already reneged on the deal. And if they do, then it's a whole different story. You're still going to have to pay the fine, but you're going to end up with that. And I've seen it where it'll end up on their record. And I mean, and we as a company try to remind them regularly, and the carriers should help them with that too.
Well, and kind of going back to the collection example, I know that if you don't pay and you do actually own the money, that collection agency may be able to garnish your wages. They might be able to damage your credit because I've seen those pop up on credit reports.
Right. Do
you have specific rights when a collection agency goes after you, and what would those be?
Well, again, the idea of the original bill. I've seen personally. I had a collection agency coming after me, and I kept saying, "Well, okay, show me the bill." And this was back when you wrote letters, and it went back and forth.
In the Stone Age with the tablets and you used the little chisel.
Yeah, exactly. And they couldn't produce it. And so I made a formal, declaration that if you put this on my credit score, I'm going to sue you because you don't have an actual bill for me. I mean, it could be anything. And I really, I knew what it was for, but I was young, and So that's that case. You can also ask for reduction. My church has started a capital campaign, and part of it is we're tithing 20% of the capital payment, whatever we put in, and we're buying medical debt in the area. You know what it costs to buy medical debt? 10% of the bill. So that, and I mean, just like anything, they're going to make money off of it, but you have a right to negotiate it. I've seen that back in my mortgage days. We would negotiate, the fines that they were trying to charge because we knew there was play. But yeah, they are scary people though.
Yeah, I've seen people that have been in that situation, and the threats can get very, very bad, and the harassment can get bad. Something you mentioned earlier when we talked about fines, I think you mentioned civil penalties.
Yes.
And I think people get a little confused about civil penalties and the difference between that and a criminal violation with a penalty. And some of those actually come from government agencies, civil penalties.
Yes.
Can you explain what the difference is in kind of layman's terms?
Sure. A civil penalty, first and foremost, is not a traffic violation. It's there's really no due process, not in the sense of what Americans, you're innocent until proven guilty. Most of them that we see in the trucking industry, they're issued by the state, like the Board of Public Utilities or the Department of Revenue, odd places. But they do offer you a hearing, an administrative hearing. It's not with a judge, and you're not going to get a deal. You can't reduce it. You might be able to, if the fine is onerous and would put you in, peril of losing, your company, then you can ask for them to reduce it, and that's something that does happen. Attorneys don't. Very rarely do any attorneys have any idea of how to deal with these because it's not criminal cases. This is not criminal, and that's why it's just a fine. That's why you don't really have the due process. They will give you a hearing, but the guy who's judging that hearing is not a typical judge. He's somebody who's been appointed to hear these, and you must absolutely prove your innocence. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's proof. So speeding, 15 over, you have a sign right in that spot where instead of what they said 60, it's 70. Okay, that's proof. But that's not, so that's something, but who has that? And what officer doesn't know what exactly the speed limit is where he's at? I've seen it once in 15 years where we caught a guy for that. So that's kind of the biggest thing. It's just they think they have a ticket, they want an attorney, and attorneys really don't work these.
Well, getting back to kind of the whole scary letter issue, one of them that was on the list you all sent me that I think is definitely scary and probably real, and that's if you get a notice saying failure to appear. If you had a court date and you didn't show up, the obvious answer is don't do that in the first place. But things happen, emergencies happen. Sometimes people are forgetful. If you get that notice, how do you proceed?
Well, if you get that notice, you got to call the court and you've got to take care of it because, again, it's kind of like the fine that you didn't pay. They can do a summary judgment on you if you don't respond quickly. And we get letters from people. They show us the letters, and they're 2 months old. And I'm like, what have you done? I mean, what did you call? did somebody say, "Oh, don't worry about it"? I mean, it's a bad deal. And the other thing is we were just dealing with this the other day, David and I, is that the FTA, when you pay it, stays on your record. Doesn't really mean anything on your record, particularly in this case because the violation was ended up being dismissed. But you have to pay that fine to clear that FTA, and if you don't, eventually it's going to catch up to you. And that's probably that, and overdue fines are probably the biggest reasons, other than having 2 serious traffic violations, as to why suspensions happen. I mean, it's almost invariable. Did you pay the fine? It's like, how did you not pay the fine? You got this ticket dismissed. So that's just another scary letter, the suspension letter.
Well, we've kind of run out of time here. We've got just a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds left. Is there anything else that you want to say about this topic, Alex?
Yes. There's something we ran into. This is the first time I've seen it in 15 years. The state of Mississippi is coming after suspending this driver for 2 serious violations, but they weren't traffic tickets. They were inspections. I'm like, oh, heck no. But if you have 2 serious violations in a certain period of time, just that, they can actually suspend your license. Now, in this case, the state didn't understand what a serious violation was because it's got to be 15 over, and they both were written for 11 to 14 over. So this guy will probably get out of this. I sent all that information to him. So if you have two reckless drivings, or a reckless driving and a 15 over, or a failure to you're following too closely, erratic lane changes, a fatal crash where a traffic control device was dismissed. Those are all serious violations. And cell phones, what those underlying scary things that David was talking about, cell phones can be a part of the issue too.
Okay. Well, guys, thank you very much for all the information. Sure appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
I've been talking with David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal, a legal services provider for the trucking industry, about various tickets and violations that can come back and create more problems for you later on, as well as scary letters that arrive in the mail and what to do about them. You can learn more by calling CDL Legal at 913-738-4836 or by going to their website, cdllegal.com. Again, that's 913-738-4836 or cdllegal.com. And you can find all that information on our website, landlinenow.com. Just click on the photo or headline at the top of the page. That's where you'll find all the website links, email addresses, and phone numbers that we mention here on the show. Again, that's at our website, landlinenow.com. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. Please stay with us through a short commercial break. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Protect your diesel engine with Howe's Diesel Defender. Restore vital lubricity, eliminate injector deposits, and boost fuel economy by 5% or more. Power, performance, protection, all in one. Howe's Diesel Defender, available now.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. Earlier today, the House Subcommittee on Highways and Transit discussed a vital topic, the need for a long-term solution to the Highway Trust Fund. Now, that's a topic that will hardly be solved in one hearing, but there are some basic principles that OOIDA would like to see followed as part of that effort. Here to discuss that and more is Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. Bryce, how are you doing?
I'm good, Mark. How about yourself?
Very well. And I want to kind of start at a little bit of a basic level here because although we've talked about it before, it has been a while. Why is there a need for a solution, in their words, to the Highway Trust Fund? What's the problem they're trying to solve?
Yeah, in short, the Highway Trust Fund is going broke. It's running out of money, and this is a problem that Congress has known about for a long time. And there's a couple of factors contributing to this, but the biggest one is the biggest source of funding for the Highway Trust Fund is fuel taxes and fuel fees, so gasoline and diesel fuel taxes. Those have been in place and have not been adjusted for a long time now. And so especially on the passenger vehicle side, as you've seen increasing fuel efficiency and hybrid and especially electric vehicles, you have vehicles and users paying less and less and less in fuel taxes. And as a result, the amount of money coming into the Highway Trust Fund has just been dwindling. So this is a problem that, like I said, been going on for a long time. And on the flip side, anytime you're trying to ask Congress to raise money, raise fees, or things like that, it gets politically difficult. So we've reached a situation where there's just not enough money coming in from these fees and taxes to sustain the Highway Trust Fund and infrastructure spending.
Yeah, and you mentioned the fact that it's been a long time since they raised the fuel tax. 1993, as I recall, so almost a quarter century ago that they last raised the highway or the fuel taxes that fuel the fund. So let's talk a little bit about why these traditional fuel taxes are not keeping up. What's driving that?
Yeah, and on the passenger vehicle side, it really is fuel efficiency. So as you've seen, cars become more efficient. They need to purchase less gasoline, and they purchase less gasoline and are paying less in taxes. So there's just been dwindling receipts from the fuel taxes on the passenger vehicle, the gasoline side. I will say it's interesting to note, though, on the diesel side and on the heavy-duty truck side, that funding has been relatively stable. Certainly, there's been improvements in fuel efficiency, but not to the degree that we've seen on the passenger vehicle side. So while the biggest problem is on the passenger vehicle side on those declining returns, heavy-duty side has been relatively stable. You know, as we've talked about many times before, there's just not widespread adoption of electric trucks on the horizon. So for all the problems on the gasoline side, the diesel side remains relatively stable. And also the heavy-duty trucks in the trucking industry pay in certain excise taxes on the purchases of new trucks, new trailers, new tires. So those are other income sources to the Highway Trust Fund that those are a little less stable, but certainly something that continues to come in. So you have some of those imbalances there, the changes in technology. It's kind of gotten us to where we are today.
So let's talk about some of the alternatives that are being discussed in D.C. overall. And none of these are really new alternatives, but of course we're coming up on a highway bill, and so that kind of brings it to the fore along with the dwindling funds in the Highway Trust Fund. And I want to start with some of the fundraising methods that are being discussed that OOIDA would not favor, that are not favorable to small business truckers. I would think that VMT has got to be near the top of that list.
Yes, absolutely. A VMT, and more specifically, a truck-only VMT, is an absolute non-starter for us. So a VMT is a vehicle miles travel tax. And so the idea being you pay some sort of fee based on the number of miles that you travel. Obviously, there's just an endless list of questions that come with how would this work? How would it be implemented? What would the fees be? And all the way down the line. One of the things that we've pointed to is that the last highway bill, the current highway bill, was supposed to establish an advisory board to set up a pilot program, a national pilot program to examine some of these questions and figure out how a VMT might work. Certainly, we understand there's interest in doing this, and if it's something that could be done, implemented cheaply, done fairly, and you answered all these questions, then maybe there's a conversation to be had there. But we're not even close to that point at all. This advisory board has not been established. OOIDA's Vice President Louis Pugh had been named to the board, but again, they have not taken any action yet. The DOT and the federal government has not directed them to do anything yet. So we think that that's a non-starter for this one. And to take it a step further, focusing only on trucks is the absolute wrong way to go. As I said before, heavy-duty trucks with the diesel tax are actually one of the more stable funding mechanisms remaining for the Highway Trust Fund. So we think that if there's any place Congress should start to look at making up the shortfall, it shouldn't be on the industry and the taxes where it's more or less stable. It should be where we've seen really big declines with hybrids, electric vehicles, and just more fuel-efficient gasoline vehicles.
One of the other methods that we're seeing more and more of around the country is tolling. And especially with the advent of these open road tolling systems where people just get on the highway and go and they get a bill in the mail later. I mean, I would think that that's got to be as you say, a non-starter.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and for tolls, it's really a tax on something you've already paid to build. So we've always opposed tolling as a funding mechanism. One of our other frustrations with tolling is it is more costly to implement than the gasoline and diesel taxes. That's one of the things that we've always pointed to when talking about a gas tax and diesel tax is that it takes about 1% of the revenues from those taxes to administer the system. Looking at tolling, you have all the infrastructure, kind of what you just mentioned, setting up like the toll readers, making sure that people have toll readers, mailing letters to people who didn't have their toll reader working and all this stuff, actually collecting and then remitting all of those funds. So it's a much more complicated system than a straightforward fuel tax. So in addition to being unfair for truckers who may not have a lot of choice in where they're driving and when or how they're going to use roads, tolling is a much less efficient way of raising revenue.
Well, and I would think if we go back to, or go over to those fundraising mechanisms that would be favorable to truckers, I would think that one of them would simply make electric vehicles pay their fair share.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually something we are pleased to see that the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee is planning on moving forward with at a markup this week. Is a fee on electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, basically an annual registration fee that owners of those vehicles would pay. The number that we've heard is $200 for EVs and $100 for hybrid vehicles. So we know that is not going to solve the insolvency of the Highway Trust Fund, but it is a really good first step in making sure that these vehicles are starting to pay into the system. It'll help to raise revenue and start to really ensure that there's some buy-in from people who own these vehicles.
Are there other methods that would be good for truckers, or what does OOIDA think should be the primary fundraising mechanism going forward?
As of right now, we have continued to advocate for an increase to the gas and diesel taxes. We know, again, there's some political considerations there, but what we've continued to stress is that it's a very efficient way of raising revenue. Again, less than 1% of the revenue from these taxes is used to implement the system. And at least in the short term, until something else is figured out, it is the best way to kind of implement that broad-based user fee for everyone on the road. So if you were to take these increase to fuel taxes, some sort of registration fee for vehicles that use a lot less or use no fuel, we think that would be a good place to start.
Okay. A lot more we could talk about on this, Bryce. I wish we had more time, but we are out for now. Thank you very much for all the information.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I've been talking with Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. And folks, obviously, this is something you definitely want to be in touch with your members of Congress about in the House and the Senate. You can call them at 202-224-3121, or you can write a letter to all the people who represent you on Capitol Hill by using the website fightingfortruckers.com. Again, that's fightingfortruckers.com. That's our program for today. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.